Gold can be bought almost anywhere. But what happens when a collector wants something money cannot easily replace? Across the world, a handful of gemstones are becoming harder to find at exceptional quality. Stones shaped by vanished deposits, extraordinary chemistry, and colors nature rarely produces twice. Some change color with the light, others come from mines whose greatest treasures may already be gone. And the stone at number 1 reveals why the rare gem market plays by completely different rules from gold. These are 10 rare gemstones collectors are watching instead of gold in 2026. And the closer we get to number 1, the harder they become to replace. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Number 10. Russian Demantoid garnet. The green rarity gold cannot replicate. Gold has one enormous advantage. Everyone understands it. Its weight can be measured, its purity can be tested, its price can be checked within seconds. Russian Demantoid garnet belongs to a very different world. Here, value can depend on something far harder to reproduce. A combination of color, geological origin, clarity, size, and even an inclusion that would normally be considered an imperfection. Demantoid is the green variety of andradite garnet. It was discovered in Russia's Ural Mountains during the 19th century, and exceptional Russian material quickly became associated with fine jewelry. Its intense green can range from yellowish green to deep green, while its unusually high dispersion can produce flashes of spectral color beneath the surface. But collectors looking at Russian Demantoid are often searching for something even more distinctive. Under magnification, some stones reveal delicate, radiating fibers known as horsetail inclusions. Historically associated with Russian material, these inclusions became so recognizable that in certain fine stones, their presence can add character rather than simply reduce desirability. That creates an unusual reversal. In many gemstones, inclusions are obstacles to perfection. In Russian Demantoid, the right inclusion can become part of the stone's identity. Scarcity becomes more obvious as size increases. Demantoid crystals capable of producing fine-faceted stones are not commonly large, making exceptional stones above several carats significantly more difficult to encounter than smaller examples. And that distinction matters. A commercial-quality green garnet and a top Russian Demantoid may share a mineral name, but they do not occupy the same collector market. Color saturation, brilliance, size, clarity, cutting, documented origin, and overall quality can dramatically separate one specimen from another. This is precisely where comparing rare gemstones with gold becomes interesting in 2026. Gold is valued partly because it is standardized and liquid. Russian Demantoid attracts collectors for almost the opposite reason. The finest examples are not standardized. Each carries its own combination of geological evidence and visual character, while truly exceptional material cannot simply be manufactured by increasing production. That does not make every Demantoid an investment. It makes the rarest Russian examples worth watching. Because when collectors compete for something nature produced only under unusually specific conditions, the question is no longer simply how much material exists. It is how many exceptional stones remain available at all. Number 9. Tsavorite garnet, the green gem that never needed enhancement. Emerald has dominated the world of green gemstones for thousands of years, but collectors watching the rare gem market in 2026 are paying attention to another green stone, one that entered the international jewelry world only in the 20th century. Tsavorite garnet. Its story begins in East Africa, where geologist Campbell Bridges encountered vivid green grossular garnet in the 1960s. Commercially important deposits were later developed in Kenya, and Tiffany and Company helped introduce the name Tsavorite to the international market in the 1970s, linking it to the Tsavo region. What collectors discovered was unusual. Tsavorite could produce a rich green comparable in visual impact to far more famous gemstones, yet its color was created naturally by trace elements, principally vanadium and sometimes chromium. Unlike many colored gemstones encountered in the broader jewelry market, Tsavorite is generally sold without routine color-enhancing treatments. That natural color is only part of the attraction. The real challenge begins with size. Tsavorite occurs in relatively small crystals, and much of the rough material contains fractures or other features that limit the size of clean faceted gems. Small stones can be found. Large, strongly saturated, transparent examples are another matter entirely. As carat weight rises, fine material becomes increasingly difficult to replace, and this is where the comparison with gold becomes more revealing. An ounce of refined gold can be replaced by another ounce of gold of the same purity. A collector can compare standardized weights and market prices almost instantly. A 5-carat Tsavorite with exceptional color and clarity cannot be replaced so easily. Finding another stone with the same saturation, transparency, cut, size, and overall visual character may take considerable time, and the next stone may still look noticeably different. That individuality creates both the attraction and the risk. Tsavorite does not have a universal daily benchmark price. Quality differences can produce major differences in value, and ordinary material should never be confused with exceptional collector-grade stones. For collectors in 2026, therefore, the argument is not that Tsavorite has somehow replaced gold. It is that the finest examples offer something standardized bullion cannot provide: natural scarcity combined with individuality. And as the stones become larger, cleaner, and more intensely green, that combination becomes progressively harder to find. For serious collectors, rarity is not simply about how much exists underground. It is about how difficult the next comparable stone will be to replace. Number 8. Padparadscha sapphire, the color with no simple definition. Some gemstones become valuable because they are difficult to mine. Padparadscha sapphire faces a different problem. Even after the stone has been found, experts may still have to decide whether its color truly deserves the name. Padparadscha is one of the most distinctive color varieties of corundum, the same mineral family that includes ruby and blue sapphire. Instead of pure blue or red, it occupies a narrow territory between pink and orange. That sounds simple. It isn't. Move too far toward pink, and the stone may be classified simply as a pink sapphire. Push too strongly toward orange, and it may fall outside the accepted Padparadscha range. Tone and saturation matter as well, which means two attractive pink-orange sapphires can receive very different market attention. The name is traditionally associated with the Sinhalese word for the lotus blossom, and Sri Lanka remains historically important to the identity of these stones. Today, however, Padparadscha sapphires can also originate from other deposits, including Madagascar and Tanzania. For collectors, origin is only one part of the equation. Treatment can be crucial. Sapphires are commonly heated to modify their appearance, and laboratory examination becomes particularly important for valuable Padparadscha candidates. A serious buyer wants to understand whether a stone is natural, whether evidence of treatment is present, and whether its color falls within the laboratory's criteria for the Padparadscha designation. This creates a market unlike gold. Gold does not become more desirable because 1 ounce possesses a slightly different balance of color from another ounce of equal purity. Padparadscha does. A subtle shift in hue can move a sapphire closer to, or farther from, one of the most sought-after color descriptions in the sapphire world. Then add size, transparency, cut, treatment status, origin, and the beauty of the individual stone. The number of truly exceptional candidates narrows rapidly. That does not mean every sapphire carrying a pink-orange appearance deserves an investment premium. In fact, the opposite is true. The narrower the category, the more important expert grading and documentation become. And that is why collectors are watching exceptional Padparadscha sapphires in 2026. Their scarcity is not defined only by geology. It is defined by a remarkably narrow intersection of chemistry, color, quality, and expert classification. Gold can be refined toward uniformity. Padparadscha becomes extraordinary because nature almost never repeats exactly the same balance twice. Number 7. Cobalt blue, spinel. Blue gemstones are not rare. Exceptional cobalt blue spinel is. That distinction is exactly why this gemstone has moved onto the radar of serious collectors. Spinel occurs in many colors, but the finest cobalt-bearing blue stones can display an intense, vivid blue that immediately separates them from more common grayish or subdued blue material. The color is associated with cobalt within the crystal structure. Yet the presence of cobalt alone does not automatically create an extraordinary gemstone. The stone still has to look extraordinary. That is where the market becomes selective. Some blue spinels are dark. Others lean noticeably gray. Some contain cobalt but lack the saturation collectors are searching for. At the highest level, the target becomes much narrower. Strong blue color, attractive tone, good transparency, excellent brilliance, useful size, and laboratory evidence supporting what the stone actually is. Then geography makes the story even more interesting. Important cobalt blue spinels have been reported from several locations, including Vietnam and Tanzania. Certain Vietnamese material, particularly stones associated with the Luc Yen region, has become especially recognized among gem enthusiasts for striking blue colors. But finding rough material is only the beginning. Recovering a crystal large and clean enough to cut into an exceptional faceted gemstone is much more difficult. As quality requirements rise, the number of stones capable of satisfying demanding collectors falls quickly. And this is where cobalt blue spinel becomes fundamentally different from gold. Gold's attraction comes partly from interchangeability. One standardized unit can be compared with another using weight and purity. Fine cobalt blue spinel refuses to behave that way. Two stones of identical carat weight can differ dramatically in hue, saturation, tone, clarity, cut, origin, and overall visual impact. Even laboratory confirmation of cobalt does not make them equally desirable. The premium belongs to the complete stone. That makes careful documentation essential, especially as market attention increases. Collectors are not simply buying the word cobalt. They are evaluating whether chemistry, appearance, rarity, and quality come together in one exceptional specimen. For 2026, that combination makes cobalt blue spinel worth watching. Not because every blue spinel is suddenly an investment, and not because it can be measured against gold with a simple percentage return. Its appeal comes from something much harder to standardize: the shrinking number of stones that meet all the conditions at once. With gold, another equivalent unit can usually be purchased. With an exceptional cobalt blue spinel, finding the next one may be the hardest part of the transaction. Number 6. Fine red spinel, the gem that spent centuries in ruby's shadow. For centuries, some of the world's most celebrated rubies were not rubies at all. They were spinels. Before modern gemological testing could reliably separate the two minerals, exceptional red spinels were repeatedly mistaken for ruby. One of history's most famous examples is the Black Prince's ruby in the British Crown Jewels. A large red spinel whose true mineral identity was recognized only much later. That history created an unusual problem. Spinel possessed the beauty and rarity to enter royal collections, yet for generations it lived under another gemstone's name. Today, collectors know exactly what it is, and the finest red examples no longer need ruby's identity to command attention. Red spinel belongs to a different mineral species from ruby. Its most desirable stones can display vivid red to slightly pinkish red colors with strong transparency and brilliance. Chromium is responsible for much of the red coloration and can also contribute to the intense visual character seen in exceptional material. Among modern collectors, one particularly vivid category has acquired the trade nickname Jedi spinel, commonly associated with highly saturated pinkish red to red stones, especially from Myanmar. The term is commercial rather than a formal gemological grade, which makes the actual quality of the stone far more important than the nickname attached to it. And quality becomes difficult to find very quickly. Fine red spinel has been recovered from important deposits in places including Myanmar, Tanzania, and other parts of Asia and East Africa. But strongly saturated stones with good transparency, attractive cutting, and significant size represent only a fraction of the material that reaches the market. That scarcity becomes increasingly obvious as collectors demand several qualities at once. The stone must not merely be red, it must possess the right red. Then it must have brilliance, transparency, size, and enough visual presence to distinguish it from the far larger population of ordinary spinel. This is where its relationship with gold becomes fascinating. Gold's identity is established by purity and weight. Fine red spinel cannot be reduced to either measurement. Two stones weighing exactly the same may occupy completely different levels of desirability. And unlike a standardized gold holding, an exceptional natural spinel cannot simply be reordered when another collector acquires it. That is why fine red spinel deserves attention in 2026. Not because every red spinel will rise in value, but because the market has spent centuries correcting one extraordinary historical mistake. A gemstone once valued because people thought it was ruby is now being pursued for precisely the opposite reason. Collectors finally understand that it never needed to be ruby at all. Number 5. Alexandrite, the gemstone that changes before your eyes. Most valuable gemstones ask collectors to judge one extraordinary color. Alexandrite asks them to judge two. In daylight or daylight equivalent illumination, a fine alexandrite may appear green to bluish green. Under warmer, incandescent light, that same stone can shift toward red, purplish red, or related warm hues. Nothing inside the gemstone has physically changed. The light has. And that transformation is the reason exceptional natural alexandrite occupies such an unusual place in the collector market. Alexandrite is a variety of chrysoberyl first associated with discoveries in Russia's Ural Mountains during the 19th century. Those historic Russian deposits produced material that helped establish the classic expectation for the stone, a strong transition between cool green and warm red. But simply changing color does not make an alexandrite exceptional. The strength of the change matters enormously. Some stones show only a partial shift. Others move through less desirable brownish or muted tones. Fine examples combine an obvious color change with attractive hues, useful transparency, good cutting, and sufficient size. Achieving all of those characteristics in one natural stone is difficult. That difficulty becomes even greater because alexandrite is not restricted to Russia. Deposits have also produced material in Brazil, Sri Lanka, East Africa, and elsewhere. Each source can yield stones with different visual characteristics, meaning collectors must evaluate the individual gem rather than assume that a famous name automatically guarantees exceptional quality. Then comes another complication. Synthetic alexandrite and other color change materials exist. For serious collector-grade stones, reliable laboratory identification therefore becomes essential. The question is not merely whether a gemstone changes color, but whether it is natural chrysoberyl, what characteristics it possesses, and how convincingly it performs the phenomenon that made alexandrite famous. This is where alexandrite separates itself sharply from gold. Gold remains gold under different lighting. Alexandrite can present two dramatically different visual identities depending on how it is illuminated. And unlike standardized bullion, there is no simple formula for replacing an extraordinary specimen. Match the carat weight, and the color change may be weaker. Match the color change, and the clarity may fall. Match both, and the required size may disappear. For collectors watching rare gemstones in 2026, that combination creates the attraction. Not every alexandrite is exceptional, but when strong color change, beauty, natural origin, transparency, and meaningful size converge in a single stone, replacement becomes extraordinarily difficult. Gold derives strength from consistency. Alexandrite derives fascination from transformation. And at the highest level, nature rarely performs that transformation twice in exactly the same way. Number 4, Colombian emerald. When imperfection becomes part of the provenance, an emerald can be intensely green and still fail to enter the highest level of collecting. Because with Colombian emeralds, color is only the beginning. For centuries, the mountains of Colombia have produced emeralds that help define what the world expects from exceptional green beryl. Historic mining districts such as Muzo, Chivor, and Coscuez became legendary sources, and Colombian stones eventually entered royal collections, museums, and important jewelry around the world. But the feature that makes this market fascinating is not simply the word Colombia. It is the extraordinary difficulty of finding everything collectors want in the same stone. Emerald is beryl-colored primarily by trace elements such as chromium and vanadium. Unlike many gemstones where obvious inclusions can severely damage desirability, emerald has a long history of being accepted with internal features. Collectors even use the French term jardin, garden, for the characteristic inclusions visible inside many stones. Yet acceptance does not mean those inclusions are irrelevant. A fine emerald still needs transparency, it still needs life, and above all, it needs color capable of commanding attention before a loop ever reaches the stone. Then treatment changes the equation. Because fractures are common in emerald, clarity enhancement with oil or other substances has long been practiced. For important stones, the degree and type of enhancement can significantly influence desirability. An exceptional Colombian emerald with strong color, attractive transparency, significant size, documented origin, and little or no clarity enhancement belongs to a far narrower category than an ordinary commercial emerald. That distinction is critical. A certificate saying Colombia does not transform every emerald into a collector's prize. The complete combination matters. And this is where comparing such stones with gold becomes revealing. Gold can be melted, refined, divided, and standardized without destroying the fundamental basis of its market value. A historic quality emerald cannot. Cut away too much material and its identity changes. Improve its appearance too aggressively and collectors may judge it differently. Lose its documentation or provenance, and part of the story surrounding an important stone may disappear with it. For collectors watching the market in 2026, exceptional Colombian emeralds therefore represent more than green gemstones. They represent a narrowing intersection of geology, origin, treatment status, beauty, and rarity. Gold asks a relatively straightforward question: how much is there? A great Colombian emerald asks something much harder. How many stones of this quality can actually be found again? And once an extraordinary example disappears into a private collection, the answer may remain unknown for decades. Number 3. Paraiba tourmaline. Some gemstones reveal their rarity slowly. Paraiba tourmaline does the opposite. Its color can announce itself from across the room. Electric blue, turquoise, blue-green. At its finest, the effect can appear almost luminous, a visual intensity that helped transform an obscure discovery in Brazil into one of the most closely watched categories in the modern colored stone market. The story began in the late 1980s in Brazil's state of Paraiba, where miner Heitor Dimas Barbosa and his team uncovered unusually vivid tourmaline from the hills near São José da Batalha. The chemistry helped explain why these stones look different. Unlike ordinary blue and green tourmalines, the material contained significant copper, producing colors rarely associated with tourmaline before that discovery. Manganese can also influence the appearance, but the Brazilian source presented collectors with a problem almost immediately. The deposit was limited, and the extraordinary stones were difficult to recover. Later, copper-bearing tourmalines were discovered in Mozambique and Nigeria, expanding the geographic story considerably. Today, laboratory analysis can be important not only for identification and treatment detection, but also because geographic origin can significantly affect how individual stones are perceived in the market. That makes the category more complicated than its famous neon color suggests. Not every copper-bearing tourmaline has exceptional color. Not every vivid stone has exceptional clarity. And not every Paraiba-type stone carries the same combination of origin, size, saturation, transparency, and cutting quality. The truly remarkable examples sit where all of those factors begin to overlap. That intersection can become extremely narrow. This is also where Paraiba tourmaline behaves nothing like gold. Gold can be standardized. Paraiba cannot. Two stones may have the same weight and both contain copper, yet one may display a muted greenish appearance, while another produces the vivid blue or blue-green glow collectors associate with the finest material. The difference cannot be explained by carat weight alone, and as quality rises, replacement becomes increasingly difficult. For collectors watching rare gemstones in 2026, that is the central attraction. Paraiba tourmaline represents a relatively modern chapter in gemstone history, proof that a discovery made only a few decades ago can create an entirely new collector category. Gold has been recognized as wealth for thousands of years. Paraiba needed only one generation to become famous, and the stones that started that transformation came from a geological occurrence so limited that the original Brazilian material remains one of the most compelling parts of the story. Sometimes rarity takes centuries to become valuable. Paraiba showed that the right color can change a market almost overnight. Number 2, Kashmir sapphire, the treasure from a mine that could not last. Some gemstones are rare because they form only under unusual geological conditions. Kashmir sapphire carries another kind of rarity. Its most famous source had an extraordinarily brief moment in history. The story begins in the early 1880s, high in the Himalayas, in what is now the Indian-administered Kashmir region. After a landslide reportedly exposed sapphire-bearing material, remarkable blue crystals began emerging from remote deposits near the village of Sumjam in the Zanskar area. What followed became one of gemology's great episodes of sudden abundance, followed by scarcity. The earliest workings produced sapphires, whose appearance would establish an enduring standard. Intensely saturated blue, often described in the trade as having a soft or velvety character. That visual effect is not simply poetic language. Microscopic inclusions can scatter light through certain Kashmir sapphires, helping create the softness associated with exceptional examples while preserving a rich blue body color. But the extraordinary early production did not continue. Within a relatively short period, the easily accessible deposits were largely exhausted, and later mining never reproduced the original output on the same scale. That changed the nature of the market. Collectors were no longer simply pursuing beautiful blue sapphire. They were competing for surviving stones connected to a historic source whose legendary production belonged largely to the past. Yet this is precisely where caution becomes essential. A sapphire does not become Kashmir simply because its color looks velvety. Other deposits can produce magnificent blue stones, and geographic origin cannot be established reliably by appearance alone. For important specimens, laboratory analysis and an origin opinion from a respected gemological laboratory can become a critical part of the stone's market identity. Treatment matters as well. Fine sapphires may be heated to modify their appearance, while exceptional unheated stones with strong color, significant size, documented Kashmir origin, and attractive clarity occupy a particularly restricted collector category. And unlike gold, that category cannot be replenished by refining more material into an identical standard. An ounce of gold can be replaced by another equivalent ounce. A significant Kashmir sapphire may have no true equivalent available when it disappears into a collection. That is why collectors continue watching these stones in 2026. Their appeal is not based simply on blue color. It rests on the convergence of beauty, geological origin, treatment status, documentation, and a historical supply that was never large to begin with. Gold represents wealth through continuity. Kashmir sapphire represents something almost opposite, a brief geological discovery whose finest survivors became more important after the source itself fell silent. And that leaves only one gemstone above it, one whose finest examples have repeatedly occupied the very summit of the colored stone world. Number 1, fine Burmese ruby, the red standard at the summit of the gemstone world. At the highest level of gemstone collecting, rarity alone is not enough. A stone needs beauty, history, provenance, and a quality so difficult to reproduce that even money cannot guarantee another example will appear. Few gemstones bring those forces together as powerfully as a fine Burmese ruby. For centuries, Myanmar, historically Burma, has been associated with some of the world's most celebrated rubies. The legendary deposits around Mogok became especially famous for stones capable of displaying an intense red color with remarkable saturation. Ruby is the red variety of corundum, the same mineral species as sapphire. Its color comes primarily from chromium. But chemistry alone does not explain why one ruby may be relatively ordinary while another becomes a prize pursued by major collectors. At this level, every detail begins to matter. The red must be exceptional. Transparency must survive the color. The cut must release light without sacrificing too much precious weight. Size matters enormously because fine ruby crystals rarely provide large, clean faceted stones. Then comes treatment. Heating has long been used with ruby to improve color or clarity. That makes exceptional stones showing no evidence of heat particularly important in the upper collector market, especially when desirable color, significant size, and documented geographic origin appear together. Even the famous term pigeon blood requires caution. It is not a simple synonym for every beautiful Burmese ruby, and laboratories apply specific criteria when using such color terminology. A seller's description alone cannot establish what an important stone actually is. That is why serious specimens are examined, documented, and compared so carefully. And here, at number 1, the comparison with gold reaches its limit. Gold succeeds because one refined unit can closely resemble another. Its market depends on standardization. A great Burmese ruby derives much of its power from being almost impossible to standardize. Another ruby may match its weight but not its color. Match the color and it may be heated. Find an unheated stone and the origin may differ. Match the origin and the transparency, cut, or size may fall short. The search keeps narrowing until very few stones remain. That does not make ruby safer, more liquid, or automatically more profitable than gold. Nor does it mean every Burmese ruby belongs in an investment collection. It means the finest examples operate under a different law of scarcity. Gold can be accumulated by quantity. An extraordinary ruby can only be acquired when one becomes available. And that is why, for collectors watching rare gemstones in 2026, fine Burmese ruby stands at the summit of this list. Not because the world is running out of red stones, but because nature produced astonishingly few in which color, size, transparency, origin, treatment status, and beauty all arrive together. Gold measures wealth in ounces. At this level, ruby measures rarity one irreplaceable stone at a time. Gold became a store of value because it could be measured, traded, and trusted across generations. These gemstones tell a different story. Their appeal lies in what cannot be standardized. A vanished source, an extraordinary color, a rare optical effect, or a combination of qualities nature may never reproduce in exactly the same way. But rarity alone never guarantees value. For serious collectors, origin, treatment, quality, documentation, and provenance can matter as much as the name of the gemstone itself. And perhaps that is the real difference. Gold asks how much you can own. Rare gemstones ask whether the one in front of you can ever truly be replaced. Because sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what costs the most. It's what may never appear again.